Hey writers, it's Mr. Marshall again at Stony Lane. Last time we talked about your realistic fiction stories, we were talking about coming up with trouble stories for your character, right? The kind of problems that they might have and just doing a quick draft of those stories, right? But I started thinking more about this. And realistic fiction is a story, right? And that's kind of like the stories you wrote earlier in the year. Remember, you wrote personal narratives, right? You wrote stories about true things that happened to you, one thing that happened one time, right? And you told a story there too. And realistic fiction didn't really happen. It didn't happen to you or to anybody really. But but you can still use some of the same skills that you use to tell the personal narratives to tell this story. And so one thing that I know we learned was that you learned how to tell your story well by not just having action, 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 but to have lots of different things, different types of things happening in your story. So we can do that in realistic fiction too. So let's remember what we want to do. In a story, when we tell a story, we want to tell using action, right? Action is something that happens. Your character is doing something, okay? That's one thing. A second thing that happens when you tell a story well is you write thoughts, thoughts and feelings, right? You write down words that say what you're thinking or what you're feeling, right? Same thing is true in fiction. So, a third thing that you do when you tell a story well is you use dialogue, right? Dialogue is the words that characters are having a conversation, right? They're like saying, and so I said this, and then he said that, and right? It's the actual words the characters are saying. And the fourth thing that you may or may not have studied, but it's a good thing to add, is to have setting, right? Setting is where you're talking about where or when your story is happening, time or place, or feeling. Okay? So watch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell one of my stories about Oliver, and I'm going to try and not just tell it with action, 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 action. I'm going to try and use all four of these when I tell my story. Okay, so I'm just going to say it out loud, but what I'm saying out loud, I would actually be writing down in my writer's notebook. Okay, so let's try this. Okay, so let's see. Let's start with dialogue. I told you to bring out the garbage, said Oliver's dad. It's Tuesday night, and it's your job. Fine, said Oliver. I'll do it. Let's have some action. Oliver's dad grabbed his keys. His mom was already waiting in the car. They were going to dinner. Hurry up, Oliver, said his dad. It's time. I have to go. Oliver thought, I wish they would just leave. And then Oliver ran and grabbed the garbage and he took it outside and down to the curb. It was really dark outside. I'm talking about the setting now. It was 6:30 in the winter, and so it was pitch black already. Just then, Oliver's parents went down the driveway and they said, all right, when you go back in, don't forget to finish up your math homework, and we'll be back in 2 hours. Right? Oh, that was dialogue too. Oliver said, fine, have a good time. And he thought, it'll be so nice to have them out of the house. It'll be nice and quiet for a little while. Oliver headed back up toward the house. He thought, man, it's really dark out here. I need to get inside. I hate the dark. It was really dark. It was really dark, and there weren't even stars in the sky, and the wind was blowing, and Oliver started feeling kind of creepy. I need to go inside because I don't like it out here, he thought to himself. He reached for the doorknob, and then he realized it was locked. Do you see what I'm doing? Do you see how while I'm telling this story, I'm using all these different ways to tell a good story? Like, I'm just going back and forth between these four kinds of things that happen in my writing. Okay? Just like I did when I wrote my personal narrative. Okay. You could do the very same thing. You need to do the very same thing when you write your story in realistic fiction to make it more interesting. Okay. So think about that while you're writing your draft, and that'll make your story kind of more exciting. Okay. Try that out, and I'll see you next time.